where does the defensible space disclosure apply? Well, in the same places that the home hardening disclosures apply, in a high or very high fire hazard severity zone identified by CAL FIRE in the SRA or in the LRA. But wait, there's more, and that is that cities and counties can be more restrictive than state law. A city or a county may regulate defensible space more strictly than CAL FIRE, and property owners must comply with those local laws. So, for example, a city may enact a local ordinance that requires vegetation management everywhere in its jurisdiction. And sellers and buyers, just like any other citizen or resident of that city, must comply with that local ordinance. Okay, so let's wrap this up. AB 38's defensible space disclosure is required in any high or very high fire hazard severity zone as identified by CAL FIRE, or where a local vegetation management ordinance requires defensible space compliance. So it comes down to a key question. Does my community require defensible space compliance? And how do I know? I'm going to explain this with a little bit of a civics lesson. And the only reason I know is because I spent 5 years in city government. We all know how a state law is made. The legislature proposes a new law, a bill, and both houses of the legislature, the Senate and the Assembly, vote and approve and pass it on to the governor, who then signs it, and it becomes a new law or statute that's chaptered in the state code. Well, it's the same process at the local level, but instead of the legislature, we have commissions. So, for example, the Planning Commission will say, we need a new ordinance to regulate hazardous vegetation on private property. Fire department, please provide us with a draft ordinance that we can consider. So the Planning Commission holds an open meeting, takes public comment, revises the draft ordinance as needed, and passes it on to the jurisdiction's governing board. At the county level, that's the Board of Supervisors. At the city level, it's the City Council. And they vote to adopt the ordinance. It becomes a local law that then is chaptered in the municipal code. Now, at every level of government in that process, there's an officer who keeps records on those new laws and ordinances. At the state level, it's the Secretary of State. At the county and city level, it's the county clerk and city clerk. And they have all these ordinances right at their fingertips. Sometimes the municipal code is available right on the city or county website. And for some cities, there's even an online ordinance database that you could very quickly look up vegetation management or defensible space. So if I'm an agent, I call up the city clerk and ask, does my city have a vegetation management ordinance? Clerk says, why, yes, the city council just passed it last week. Well, please send me a copy of that ordinance, or send me the link where I can download it from your website so that I can share it with my real estate sellers and buyers. And boom, you're now the local real estate expert on AB 38's defensible space disclosure. And when you get that ordinance, be sure to read it and verify whether it includes a point of sale requirement. In other words, does the ordinance require the property owner to obtain documentation that the property complies with a defensible space regulation before the property can be sold? That can really complicate a transaction, so you want to get that proof of compliance as early as possible if that's the case. But the point is, seller and buyer are going to be looking at the agent as the expert in local real estate to know who that local fire authority is. So if you don't already know, you probably should find out before July 1st. Okay, so finally, AB 38 is not the most clearly written law in California history. CAR has done its best to translate and simplify AB 38 with its form HHDA and the new one, the FHDS. But it's a complicated law. If you want a legal interpretation of AB 38 or reliable legal advice about any law, don't ask your NHD provider. Ask a legal expert, an attorney who can represent your interests. And that's why at the bottom of every slide that you've seen here in my webinar, there's this red disclaimer: consult your corporate counsel. I want to finish up with just some best practices for AB 38. First, use a reputable NHD provider that does these things. Many providers don't. Use a report that includes the AB 38 disclosure, a report that explicitly discloses CAL FIRE's high or very high fire hazard severity zones in the SRA, a report that relies on CAL FIRE's current official fire hazard severity zone maps, and a report that tells you specifically which maps were used to make those fire zone disclosures with. Second, call the city clerk or the county clerk to investigate whether a vegetation management ordinance exists in your territory where you do business. Third, obtain the proof of compliance early with regard to the defensible space requirements. A lot of people don't realize that a defensible space inspection has two possible outcomes. You can pass, here's your proof of compliance, proceed with your transaction, or you can fail. Here's a list of your violations. Now you've got 30 days within which to fix them. So if you fail, you can get out there and quickly clean up the property, do a lot of tree trimming and landscaping, or you can hire a contractor to do it for you. That gets expensive. We've heard cases of up to tens of thousands of dollars cleaning up a property for a defensible space inspection. And then you've got to schedule a re-inspection by the fire authority to come out and pass that one so that you can get that proof of compliance. And if you can't afford that, then the city or county can come in and do it for you and bill you for the services. If you can't pay that bill, they'll put a lien on your property. And nobody wants those costs and delays and red flags showing up on their transaction during the escrow period. It can delay closing. It can allow the buyer to rescind the offer or give the buyer an opportunity to negotiate the price downward. So if the ordinance requires it, get that proof of compliance early. So thanks for attending my webinar. I want to leave you with a takeaway of some useful AB 38 resources. Ask your First American or JCP sales representative to explain the AB 38 disclosures in the First American and JCP report. And finally, tune in to NHD Academy on the web to see our educational videos. There's 9 of them that cover California's natural hazard disclosures. And we'll see you later.